Michael with United Veterans Worldwide, excited today to meet with my friend Nate. I've interviewed Nate's brother in the past, and Derek and I had a great conversation. I'm excited to introduce this audience to Nate and hear a little bit about his story. So, Nate, will you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who you are, what you
Yeah.
do?
Well, I'm a mental health counselor. I specialize in trauma. Um, I've been a therapist for we're going on 14 years. Um, that math isn't right. No, that is right. Okay. 13, 14 years. And one of my actually other biggest specialties is actually using fitness to help improve mental health, just because of that big connection. Um, and that was actually what interested me in trauma, is seeing how much trauma affects someone physically. Trauma is not just in the mind.
Right.
Our heart rate, we get muscle tension, we can't sleep, like all these physical symptoms that occur with trauma. And so studying this and seeing actually that um, improving our physical health, and I'm saying this as a therapist, can be better than therapy in a lot of different ways. I'm very pro therapy, and it does benefit, but I saw that to truly heal mentally, sometimes it requires us to either grow or heal physically. And that led me to have a big interest um, working with veterans, just because a higher population of veterans do experience trauma. Um, yeah. Um, what else am I? I'm a father of 5 kids, 4 boys, 1 little girl. I have a dog. Um, I'm actually bringing him up because we just completed therapy dog certification.
Oh, good,
Um,
good.
and so it was 8 months of training, me and my dog going through very rigorous testing, lots of like qualifications, not just like physical obedience, but like he had to show he liked people and could respond to like big crowds and stuff like that. And so now he's certified. He's actually my work partner. He's sitting right next to me. Um, yeah.
That's perfect. That's a great introduction. I love the fact that you've learned and are now implementing a fitness as one of the levers for coping with mental health to help people get over that boundary. Um, maybe fitness for me was the initial catalyst that opened the door for me to be willing to talk about my experiences with the therapist, and using several tools, EMDR, direct exposure therapy, all
Mm-hmm.
of these things that kind of walked me through some buried trauma that I had kept for way too long, that caused way too many health related issues. Um, and so I'm so glad that as a therapist you recognize that tie and that connection between mental health and the body.
Right. Well, and you brought up something that I very much resonate with, is a lot of veterans, they're very resistant to talk about their problems. They feel like it's a weakness if they tell other people that they might not be feeling as strong, and obviously there's a culture in the military where you have to be strong. And that one of my draws for veterans with fitness is exactly what you pointed out, where sometimes they don't want to talk, but they're okay having a workout buddy.
Yeah.
And they're okay having someone help improve their physical health. And that does open doors to conversation. You mentioned EMDR. I actually use EMDR. I am an EMDR certified therapist.
Mm.
Um, and I use EMDR in a fitness kind of situation.
Mm.
Um,
Can you tell me what that looks like?
Oh, absolutely. It's very simple. If you're familiar, or if you remember what EMDR is that bilateral stimulation.
Yep.
And most therapists, they're going to sometimes they use a metronome or a light bar that goes back and forth, or
Yep.
TheraTapper vibrate. A lot of people don't realize we use EMDR every day, not just when we're sleeping, but also when we're awake. And one of my best EMDR tools, I have it in my office right now, is a treadmill.
Yeah.
Because when we walk with someone and talk, we're actually doing a type of EMDR because the walking is bilateral stimulation. And so I've had a lot of conversations. Sometimes when the weather's good, I'll go and just walk with someone and have an EMDR session that way. When the weather's not good, my best tool is a treadmill, and I'll just stand next to them and they set the pace on the treadmill, and we have an EMDR session that way. Um, but it's kind of utilizing EMDR in a fitness kind of thing. I've done it also in a weightlifting thing. So I've been a certified personal trainer for a while, 18 years, I think.
Mm.
But I've used EMDR in a weight training thing when I'm helping my clients in weight training. So we'll do alternating bicep curls. And like we'll do a lot of stuff EMDR related, helping with their trauma, improving their physical health, and also addressing, their mental health.
Well, this is really good. I don't know if you saw me smile when you said walking, because I never correlated EMDR with fitness.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started my YouTube channel, dedicated to global veterans who first responders who were struggling with trauma-related conditions, I would put on a weighted vest when it was nice outside. Like we're in Utah, and it's definitely not nice outside. um, but I would put on a weighted vest. I'd get my selfie stick, and I'd walk for a mile as I talked, and it was incredible because I felt like I was talking to somebody. And in that process, I started to reveal things that I would never have revealed really on a video.
Right.
Because it became a form of therapy for me, even though I wanted to feel like I was talking to a global audience, and people did tune in, but it really was helping me to express things that I just wasn't saying to other people.
Right. Well, there's a reason we get the urge to pace when we're feeling stressed. It's our brain going, hey, I could process information better if I'm left foot, right foot, walking back and forth, doing bilateral stimulation. That's the very concept of EMDR. And it's funny because what you mentioned is I've actually literally recommended to my clients, if you are feeling stressed, go for a walk. And I tell them so people don't think you're crazy, to pull out your phone and pretend you're talking to someone.
Ooh.
And just talk about your problems. Talk to whoever it is, and walk and talk. And it's an amazing therapeutic tool that, like I'm saying, we utilize more than we think.
Yeah, that is perfect. I love that. I love when I do something I don't realize it's actually helping.
Uh-huh.
And you've shown me that there's an education part of that. That's awesome. Nate, take me back in time a little bit. Prior to joining the Army, what were you doing? What led to that? And maybe some personal struggles you've had as you've gone through that process.
Sure. Well, actually, I'm going to take you back a little bit more in time.
Yeah.
What led me to this linking fitness into mental health?
Great.
There was a short time in my life where I physically couldn't work out. I was actually paralyzed. I got a rare disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And what that disease is your body for some reason thinks the nerve cells are like a virus. And so the antibodies that my body created attacked and killed on my nerves. So I was left, when I say paralyzed, I was paralyzed from my whole body. I couldn't blink. I couldn't lift a fork. I couldn't press the nurse button. I lived in the hospital for about half a year.
Oh my goodness.
And it used to be something that was fatal, because one of the things that shuts down is your lungs. You can't breathe.
Yeah.
But they've learned ways to stabilize you. And when your body thinks, just like any virus, any cold that you're experiencing, once your body goes, cool, I've killed the virus, the antibodies go away, and then my nerves are able to grow back. But that's a very slow process. And that's actually my very, very first introduction to a therapist. Because I'm sitting in the hospital, and literally I was a conscious vegetable. I could talk, like I could move my vocal cords, but I couldn't really move my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, so that people could understand me, it took two hands to lift my hand up, and I'd rest my hand like this so that I could move my lips. So if I wanted to use a word that said like people,
Yeah.
I go people. I'd have to manually close my mouth because I physically couldn't do it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and so I mean, I couldn't even blink, and so nurses would come in every half an hour and they put eye drops in my eyes so that my eyes wouldn't dry out, and at nighttime they tape my eyes shut so that I could sleep. But that was like I got to feel what it's like not having access to your body. And so as I started to recover, and like I'm saying, it was a very, very slow process. I remember like my feet turning on eventually. They started shaking like crazy. It was awesome. And then I remember the first day I was able to blink again. And it was like, I mean, it was effort. We something we definitely take for granted is
Yeah.
the ability to blink. And then slowly started recovering. Like I was able to eventually be able to sit up. I worked to a wheelchair. I worked to a walker. I worked to double canes. I worked to, and eventually, for me to leave the hospital, they said I needed to show a slow jog and have like a 1 inch vertical. But like I said, I was in there from August till December.
What age were you?
22. 22. So, and this, I mean, because I got this disease, and this is actually part of the longer story, I didn't think the military was for me. I mean, I had this rare blood disease, and
Is it a
for
genomic disease? Is
years,
it a chromosome?
it's
What is it?
we don't know.
Okay.
It's you're more likely to get struck by lightning. It's extremely rare.
So is it more tied to like a virus?
We don't know.
We don't
We
know.
don't know if it's the antibodies, the virus, some combination, the nerves. It's too rare to study. Like we can't predict it. There has been some cases, and I see the scare tactics used a lot with like vaccines. There actually have been some vaccines that we've seen an increase in Guillain-Barré syndrome. And
Wow.
vaccine like especially for someone with, in my case, like I actually really have to study any vaccine I take, because just to see if there is a increased likelihood of me getting this again.
How scary.
Yeah, but I was on my way to leave the hospital, and one of my biggest passions was playing soccer. And I remember I asked the doctor before I left. This is the Friday before I left the hospital, so I'd already got my discharge paperwork. And I said, "Hey, will I be able to play soccer again?" And the doctor said, "No. Like, you'll waste your time. Don't even try. People don't fully recover from it." And right there, that was my motivation. I mean, I was decent at soccer. I didn't have any college prospects. No one was looking at me. I was never starter in high school. I had a total of 48 minutes of playing time because I was like second and third string goalkeeper in high school. I was a goalkeeper. But I wanted to play it. But when that doctor told me no, I'm like, all right, I'm leaving this hospital. I'm hitting the ground running. Running was like a 3-mile-per-hour jog, but
Yeah.
as best I could. And it took a year's recovery and a year and a half later, I actually tried out for my first college team and I played and I made it. Became the starting goalkeeper that year, captain the next year, and I was able to play 4 years of college soccer.
What school?
I played at UVU.
Yeah.
And then Dixie went NCAA, and I actually went down and played down at Dixie.
Very cool.
Because they were the only NCAA men's soccer team in the state at the time.
Very cool.
This was 2009. It was a while ago. But anyway, so like I had that career. I actually even had the opportunity to try out professionally. I would have had to quit my last year of school, and I was wanting to be a therapist. So I started seeing this connection on what my body was doing to my mental health, and what not having access to my body, literally, how it was affecting my health, and seeing my mental health improve as I was able to kind of gain access again to my body. So that's where this connection between fitness and mental health was created. And I wanted to be a therapist, and I chose instead of taking the tryout to be on the MLS, I chose to become a therapist. Most days I don't regret it, but there's always that. Who knows where I could have gone. But
yeah, the paths we take. You mentioned the doctor saying, "Hey, you're not going to be able to X, Y, and Z." Um, After I was wounded and had to have a total shoulder replacement. Well, actually, just before I had the full replacement, orthopedic surgeon after orthopedic surgeon said, I won't touch your shoulder. It's too messed up. I won't do anything. I don't want to put my reputation on the line with this. And but they said, you'll never lift again. You'll never, do that. You should really take up running. And I was like, I hate running. So had the full replacement. Moved here actually moved it to Utah, northern Utah, right after I had this surgery in northern Texas. And I had an incredible female surgeon who said it was the hardest she's ever seen or ever done. Took forever, but it was her best work. And I believed her. And so when I came to here and I had a physical therapist who was really gifted, and he said something similar. He's like, I'm going to get you to the best range of motion I can get you to. And it hurt in the process, obviously, but you're probably never going to be able to do most of what you did before. And like you, I said, that just can't be true. And it doesn't feel good to do a pull-up today, but I can do 5 or 6 in a row. And I can work within my limitation. But I appreciate doctors' advice in a lot of ways. But I also have to say that they don't fully understand, one, the power of the human mind to overcome obstacles physically, and number 2, the power of the body to heal and adapt to the new usage of that area again. Even with plastic and metal, it can still adapt, and muscles can form around it that don't even look the same as the other side, but will.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that.
Well, and so kind of going back and forth, but so then I became a therapist, really focusing on that connection, our physical body and our mind.
Yeah.
And I had a desire to work with veterans, just because I could see it's something that they would have tap into more.
Yeah.
Because, there's that part of that military. There's a very physical part of being in the military that I knew kind of reconnecting that could make a huge difference. And then also an alternative, just to sitting down and talking, I know veterans respond to. So I started working with veterans.
Nate, can I just interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
You said something that really was significant to me. The veterans that I saw who left the military and continued their exercising, their fitness, their focus on that, like they'd been trained to do for years, were the ones who most frequently avoided that line of suicide.
Absolutely. It's hard to do that though, because in the military you have your sergeants, your everyone else is pushing you, and there's not as much internal motivation. There's tons of external. I mean, your whole company, if you don't get up out of bed, everyone's kind of getting punished for it. Yeah. And so everyone else is going to get you out of bed, even if you don't feel like doing it today.
That's true. Yeah.
But it's really hard to switch that over to that internal part of motivation. And that was something, I've seen a lot of veterans. They go, well, what's my motivation now? I've been motivated the entire time I was in the military by something else, and now I just don't have anything. And I do see a lot of veterans kind of, fall pretty far once they leave the military. In fact, the biggest, or the time when a veteran's at most risk for suicide is actually his first year out of the military, or the first year after they get back from a deployment. because that transition and motivations and goals and support systems and everything else, it just completely changes. Sometimes it's even wiped out.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest risks for veterans. And get where I was.
So you were talking about going into PT.
Oh, yeah. Oh, see, it's not physical therapy.
Oh, sorry.
I call it exercise therapy.
Yeah, yeah.
My brother's a physical therapist. I'm a mental therapist.
That's right.
But I use exercise. Yeah, and so working with veterans, wanting to help. My first job as a therapist, I was a court-ordered therapist, which means someone would get in trouble with the law, and the judge would sentence them to therapy instead of, hard time or jail or something like that.
Interesting.
And so I had a lot of DUI clients, domestic violence. Those were my big ones, drug abuse, those kind of things. And as I don't know if you're aware, but if someone in the military gets a domestic violence charge, they could get kicked out.
Yeah.
Because you can't carry a firearm. It's it's a violent charge, it's a felony. And so what a lot of veterans would do if they did get a domestic violence charge, they would basically agree to go to therapy, and that could actually get the charge expunged. So I did work a lot with veterans, but trying to work with them on what the core issue was that led to their drinking or their anger or their violence was things that happened in the military, most specifically trauma. And I worked with, because that military experience, I didn't know the culture, I didn't speak their language. They just felt like they couldn't open up to me. And I was working with one veteran. He was medically retired because he was wounded in Iraq and lost his support system, got into drinking, led to a DUI, or I think it was a public intox charge, and then led to him meeting me. And he told me, sorry, I'll talk to you about the drinking, work on like that, but I can't really talk to you about the military because it's just too much to explain. I worked with him, tried to help him as best I could, but then he still ended up taking his own life. And after I heard about that, I was like, okay, I don't like not being able to help people. And seeing people fall through the cracks, stuff like that, it weighs heavy on my heart. So I decided to join the military. The biggest reason I didn't join the Marines is because the recruiting office was closed that day, and the Army recruiter was next door. He's like, hey, come join the Army. I was like, cool. Okay. I decided to enlist instead of commission as an officer because I wanted to know the military culture of an enlisted soldier. Officers, they live a comfy life.
We do.
It's different. And I wanted to know the true experience. I didn't want to give up being a therapist, so I joined the reserves so that I could continue being a therapist. And I actually became a military policeman. So get shipped out to basic training. I'm at reception, and I told my recruiter, hey, I had this disease that killed in my nerves. I was paralyzed for a while. And the recruiter's like, well, are you better? I was like, yeah, I played 4 years of soccer afterwards. He's like, yeah, just don't tell anyone.
Good recruiter. There.
Yeah. But I showed up at basic training at reception. We get all our shots, we get everything. And on one of the medical questionnaires, there was a box that said, have you had Guillain-Barré syndrome? I was like, oh, well, I can't lie on the medical form. And so I checked the box, and the nurses were like, okay, if you checked any box, talk to us. If not, just put it in the pile, whatever. Well, I went up and I gave this thing to the nurse, and the nurse was like, I've been here for 7 years. I have never seen a single person check that box.
I'm sure.
And people kind of freaked out because they're like, we we've never had this experience happen before. And they're like, you have to go to a specialist, but it's a month out before you can get in to see the specialist. You got to wait here at reception for a month until you can get in. And reception is nothing but sitting around, standing in line.
Yep.
And so I had to wait for a month, and went into the specialist. I got cleared, and went off to basic training. I was excited. Everyone else was. This was back during the shark attack time, and I was just like, yes, I'm out of reception. This is awesome. And went through basic training. Was getting ready to go to AIT, and they're like, sorry, you started late because you were a month in reception. You have to wait another 7 weeks before your AIT cycle starts. Once again, as a holdover. And it was when I went into reception, and it was just kind of like just stand in the back of the line, wait for a month. I was reminded of Viktor Frankl's experience. Now, reception basic training is not like a concentration camp.
Yeah.
But I remember when he was stuck in this concentration camp, he decided to basically study human behavior and what it's like. And so I kind of made the same decision. I was like, you know what? I'm already a therapist. I'm already licensed. I want to understand the psychology. I mean, of a soldier, of basic training, of this process of turning a civilian into a soldier. And so I started studying like crazy. I didn't have access to books, but being stuck in reception, being stuck not able to train, there was a lot of other soldiers who either got injured during basic or just wanted to go home. I actually interviewed every single soldier I could that was being sent home to kind of really understand, okay, what's going on. And I found half of the people were going home because of mental reasons, missing their family, anxiety, depression, those kind of things. The other half were physical injuries. And I would like, okay, what's the injury, mental or physical? I had like 4 or 5 notebooks of just notes, of observations, had my own journals, stuff like that to really understand the mind of a soldier.
Incredible.
And so I was that was kind of my goal. Do
you think that God kind of gave you that holdover scenario so that you really could employ that methodology of understanding a little bit more?
Absolutely. I just see God's hand in a lot of different. My second day as a holdover in reception, there was a new cycle coming in, getting ready for basic training, and I noticed there was one soldier who, to me, I was seeing all the signs of severe depression. He started isolating himself, wasn't talking, withdrawing, all this stuff. And I actually went up to him, I talked to him. I didn't give an official therapist suicide assessment, but I checked to see how he was doing. Talked with him, worked him through it. We eventually got him help. I ran into him later, and he said, if you weren't there, I was planning on slitting my wrist that night in the shower.
Oh, good mercy.
Yeah. And so, when I heard that, I was like, oh, this was why, or one of the reasons why this had to happen to me.
Wow.
So that I was there for that one soldier. Yeah, so I definitely saw God's hand.
That's incredible. I often talk on this channel about the importance of being in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right things.
Right.
I'm going to push pause for just a second. My wife's running a vacuum. I need to have her shut that thing off. Just a sec. Marcy. That was funny to see her reaction. She's like, oh, I forgot.
We're good.
But I love the fact that despite despite it being a difficult scenario for you to be held back and put on pause for so long, you were in the right place at the right time to make a difference in someone's life with the right person, right? Doing the right things. It's amazing to me to witness those stories. It's impactful.
Right. Well, and you mentioned my life was put on hold. I didn't complete my AIT training for another 6 years. Um, the stuff with my unit getting ready to deploy, I blew up my knee, and it put my opportunity to go back to complete AIT on hold. And it eventually got to the point where, like, well, you don't have enough time in your contract to go to AIT either. They were trying to kick me out. They're like, well, sorry, just maybe the Army's just not for you. And I'd already been through so much just to try to make in the Army, and
Yep.
I had to like get legal advice on how to stay in. And they're like, no one who has ever not completed AIT has wanted to stay in. They said I was kind of the first case, and eventually I had to sign a new contract so that I could go to AIT. But I spent 6 years without a profession in the Army.
And you were married
Eventually,
at this
I was
time
able
and
to.
had kids and everything?
Yeah. So I had during this time, yeah, I had two more kids. I went off to basic training. I had three kids, and I had two more kids since then. Um, Trying to think if I completed AIT before or after my divorce. I think it was after.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I had a
That had
divorce
to have
all
added
through there.
stress on your marriage and everything else, didn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. Because here I wasn't able to advance. I was still expected to go to, all the drills. This whole 6 years, I was being told I wouldn't get credit for it, um, get kicked out, whatever. Um, yeah, and so it definitely was stressful on my marriage.
Ugh.
Um, and I don't want to say it led to my divorce, but I remember when I got the divorce papers. You talk about the right place, right time kind of thing. Like it was another one of those moments, just like when that guy said, "Hey, I was planning on killing myself that night." I remember when I got my divorce papers, the thought that you've been preparing your whole life for this. I mean, I'm a therapist. I've been working with people with relationship issues. I would say divorce is a bigger reason people come to therapy than like anxiety and depression or any other type of
Mm.
thing. I work a lot with kids. Easily over half the kids I see is because of a divorce. I've studied, read books, literally taken a class about divorce and the effects on kids and grown-ups. And so when I was facing my own divorce, like I had that knowledge. And I'm a big advocate of practicing what you preach.
Yeah.
Um, and as much as I wish I could have saved my marriage, um, I practiced everything I could. Like obviously I read the books on how to keep a marriage, but it's never a guarantee.
Yeah.
Um, but this is a weird way of putting it. I've been through divorce hundreds of times.
Yeah.
Being right in the middle as a mediator for divorce couples, seeing the most toxic conflict through divorce before I even had to experience mine. That I knew some of the red flags to avoid, some of the how to work through this stuff. And I feel like I had some different approaches just because I've been through divorce so many times as a therapist
Yeah.
on the outside. It was definitely very different going through it myself versus being that therapist.
Mm.
But we were able to settle everything outside of court. The conflict definitely wasn't as bad as what I've seen. Um, I mean, we're friends now. I'm friends with my ex. Um, we work still pretty good together.
Yeah.
Um,
Glad to hear that.
but but I feel like if I didn't have that preparation, I would have fallen right into that trap that so many couples fall into. And so it was kind of building up that without knowing it was going to happen, but building up that readiness for this trauma actually made a huge difference in that whole process.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, life experience sometimes prepares us for what's to come. Um, divorce is one of those scenarios where it takes two to really make it work, and sometimes the challenges and the differences and the changes are so drastic that it's so difficult to maintain that. I experienced some of those same feelings maybe when I started to really struggle emotionally, physically with PTSD, depression, anxiety so heavily. And this was a couple of years after I retired, 2 years after. And I remember I approached my wife and I just said, we left on a deployment and we were like this, and you kept growing and I felt like I went sideways, and we come back together and we're just not aligned. I said, why are you with me? Why do you stay? I'm struggling so bad. Why are you here? Go take the kids. You can have everything. Um, and it was sad that I got to the point like that. But when I didn't even realize my greatest source of connection and healing was really my spouse, who didn't judge, stayed by my side, and I was not nice. I was not nice. I was very selfish. I would isolate. I wouldn't help. I wouldn't contribute. I didn't have the skills to do that when I was struggling so bad. And so it makes sense how sometimes couples can get to that point. I'm just so glad that I didn't, and it really was because of my wife.
Right. Well, I wish every couple had those skills. Um, I but sadly, most of the time we don't realize we need them until we're going through something.
Yep.
I have had a couple times in my career where I've had a couple come in, and I'm a foul weather friend. People only talk to me when things are bad. And so when these couples, I've had it happen, I think 3 or 4 times. When these couples would come in, I'd be like, okay, well, what's going on? What's the conflict? Well, what do we need to solve here? And they're like, nothing, we're fine. I'm like, well, why are you here? And they're like, we don't want to have a conflict. We want to learn the skills now.
Ooh.
Before any conflict arises, so that we're ready, so that these conflicts don't turn into something bad. It's really interesting, like seeing people take that proactive approach.
What do you think about
and
that?
I love it. Oh, it's amazing. And to be honest, I've never seen these couples come back saying, oh, well, those skills didn't work. Because they learned the skills beforehand, they used them when they needed to. They didn't develop bad communication skills, bad habits. They didn't build that resentment that often happens. And that was really eye-opening for me. In fact, like I started to apply this or research this in other different ways. I found that it's 4 times harder to learn a coping skill after a trauma than it is before a trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But when do people try to learn coping skills? After they've experienced something that they have to cope with. And then I also found that only a third of the service members who end up taking their own life seek out help. They try to do it by themselves. And sadly, they don't succeed.
Yeah, they turn to negative coping mechanisms that just make that spiral go faster.
Right.
I've seen
that's
it.
actually what causes it. I mean, causes alcoholism and drug abuse and anger issues and all those things. Is
Adultery.
It's something that the brain goes, well, it kind of worked.
Yeah.
Like I felt better while I was intoxicated. I felt better while I was yelling.
Yeah.
And so the brain goes, cool, here's the coping skill I'll use. But it didn't have anything else that, was in its toolbox. So it reached for something. And yes, if I stub my toe, I'm going to yell and I'm going to feel better and I'm not going to feel as much pain. And the brain goes, well, yelling's in my toolbox. Okay, I'll use it with conflict.
Yeah.
And to handle trauma and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden that negative coping skill really takes hold, which makes it so much harder to learn something that's less destructive, that's healthy and can help them through it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Nate, I'm very curious. Your vision for going into the military was because you saw that there was a need that you couldn't meet totally because people wouldn't let you in. And now you're part of this military culture and you have been for many years. How has that translated into working with veterans?
Honestly, I feel like just being in the military allows a veteran to open up more. Like they almost feel more relaxed because they know I've gone through something similar.
Yep.
I haven't been a Marine. I haven't, I'm not infantry. I haven't been in combat, so I don't have like, 100%. I've gone through what you've gone through, but that never has to be the case.
Yep.
But for some reason, if people know I at least have somewhat of an understanding, I can help them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never tried heroin or cocaine, but people go, oh well, if you have somewhat of an understanding, feel more comfortable. You're on my side. I can relax, and that's made a big difference. And also, like I'm saying, I committed myself, even starting at basic training, to understand the mind of the military, the mind of a soldier, this conditioning process and stuff like that. And so I feel like not only do I have that understanding because I went through it, but also I've kind of tried to look behind the curtain, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's powerful, and I commend you for your efforts to do that and to join this community that is a lifelong brotherhood that connects you with people all over the world who have gone through a similar process of training, injuries, struggle with mental health, or at least witnessing it yourself firsthand. And you adding in divorce, I think about the conflict that's happening right now in Russia, Ukraine, and all the soldiers who are coming home from this dastardly conflict that is so dirty. Relationships are going to suffer. People are going to commit suicide. They're going to battle all the same functions that we've all dealt with. If they've suppressed the trauma and tried to be tough guys, then it's going to come out physically in injuries and illness and all the other things, right? That just make people spiral. And so I'm hopeful that the message that you and I are discussing today will resonate with some of these people who tune in. And I'll promote this so that it goes as wide as I can globally in a week or two. And hopefully someone there will hear the message and will see that there is an ability to get from this trauma that they've undergone to a place of triumph. And maybe that's fitness, maybe it's nutrition, maybe it's really focusing on their mental health, or maybe it's focusing on their spirituality, or making and keeping connections, or serving in their community. All of these different levers to pull that can take people from a place of darkness and bring them to light,
Yeah. Well, and I think the day to work on that is now.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if you haven't experienced the trauma. It doesn't matter if your marriage is great. It doesn't matter, what you have going on, or if you have gone through that. And that's kind of the big thing I'm trying to help with my new nonprofit, is take initiative today. And what I love, so I've tried my best to help everyone I can as a therapist and a counselor. But like I'm saying, only a third of the people actually come in.
Yep.
Who are at risk for suicide.
Yep.
And that 2/3 group weighs heavy on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so my nonprofit that I just started is trying to help people build those skills right now so that they never become at risk for suicide, taking their own life, long-term chronic PTSD. And so I've developed this plan, this kind of resiliency development plan. And I'm specializing on the mental side, and my brother, the physical therapist. We've actually looked at the most common injuries. In fact, I've taken some of my notes from basic training, and I looked at the most common injuries that were causing people not to complete their career. And interestingly enough, the most common injury that occurs in basic training is actually, I forgot what it's called. stress fractures
Yeah,
from
yeah,
marching.
yeah,
People don't know how to march right.
yeah.
And obviously we're marching and running and doing a lot more than what we typically do, and that kind of change is really hard on people, and then they
Yeah.
develop stress fractures. Well, my brother's kind of developed a physical resiliency plan to help with those most common injuries. Not just stress fractures, but also there's been some good studies on ways to develop your body to reduce the risk of a TBI, and things like that. And so we kind of taken what are the biggest risks in the military: PTSD, TBI, stress fracture,
Yep.
marital issues, like all those things, and created a plan to help build their body and mind to handle that before those things happen.
I love it.
We've done the same thing with first responders. We've looked into what are the most common injuries, what are the most common mental health issues with police and firemen and first responders, and kind of done the same thing. And that's a big part of that is our nonprofit, is preventing. It's called Protector Shield Preventative Services. We're trying to prevent the chronic PTSD or the career-ending injury. We're both able to treat PTSD and injuries and stuff like that, but we're trying to reach out to the people that might not reach out if it does happen to them.
So your nonprofit is called Protector Shield Preventative?
Preventative Services,
Services.
PSPS. Because we always want a PS after a trauma happens, not just the end.
I like it. I like it. I love the idea of anything that's holistic. And once our interview's over here in a couple minutes, I'll just talk to you offline about an idea I've got. But I love when we can combine multiple things to and look at the whole person as it applies to therapy. So we're looking at the physical and we're looking at the mental, the emotional, and those pieces have such an important tie-in. Nate, I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story. What a unique story, and yeah, I had no idea of this physical nerve issue that you experienced in your 20s, that could have been life ending, that could have created a psychological defect that would spin you down where you didn't want to work on getting better.
Right.
And for anybody on this channel who's undergone combat or been injured on duty as a first responder, we know how hard it is to get back to a place of wellness physically when we've been injured. And I'm so grateful that Nate has shared his experience today, because without giving us greater detail, I'm sure there was pain. I'm sure there was a lot of effort and work to rebuild, to structure the bones, muscles, everything. Like, I can't even imagine. And I love seeing the story of human resilience after physical trauma or mental trauma. Yeah. Nate, last couple minutes here, give us some advice for anybody who is undergoing trauma right now, or could be experiencing trauma in the near future. What advice would you give to them?
Well, one, build yourself now. That's doesn't matter where you're coming from. If we're focusing on the negative, we're gonna quit. And so focus on knowing your own strength. And it doesn't matter if it's like, okay, I can only walk 10 steps. Well, that's some strength, because you can walk 10 steps. Push to go 15, but focus on the strength. That's why I try to help everyone remember. Is yes, we go through stuff. We have a lot that pushes us down, but we also have some strength pushing back. And if we focus on that, that's how we could build that strength to overcome whatever it is. The coolest things I see, which is why I focus so much on the physical along with the mental health, is I've seen people not have PTSD symptoms anymore, like gone, cured. That's something that I haven't seen on only focusing on, only the mental health, only the physical health. But like you said, it's combining everything, and looking at your strengths to help overcome your weaknesses is how we keep getting stronger.
Yeah, Well said. Well put. Well put. Thank you for your efforts on behalf of veterans, first responders, what you've done, and joining this brotherhood. It's an incredible story, and I'm excited for this global audience to hear it today. But Nate, glad to have you join us today, and we'll stay in touch. But thanks again.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on.